Morning. This is Dr. Kanan from Chengalpet, India, talking to you regarding the ancient links between Korea and Japan and India. To understand the connection between Korea and Japan, we need to see the geography of that region. Korea is really very close to Japan. The southern islands connect Korea with Fukuoka and then towards the northern Japan. And similarly, the Japanese Okinawa is also very close to southern Korea. So, in this connection, Korea has been culturally and historically linked to Japan. And the history says that most of the kings of Japan married to the beautiful woman of Korea. And secondly, the Mahayana Buddhism spread to Japan via Korea. And there is a very beautiful, a huge temple in a place called Nara in southern Japan. And the temple is called Todaiji. And the Todaiji is so beautiful and huge. They constructed a huge image of Buddha that to give you a scale that people can enter into that wooden Buddha's nose. So you can imagine how big the whole structure of Buddha must be. If a man could get into the nose hole of that statue, then you can imagine how big that temple should have been. And that is the connection between Korea and Japan. And when Zen Buddhism spread, it's again from Korea, it went all the way to Japan. For example, when Zen Buddhism was started by Bodhidharma, Bodhidharma was called as Damo in China, but then he was called Talma in Korea, and then Daruma in Japan. And so that also evidences the spread of Buddhism via Korea. But the Kaya Federation story tells that Buddhism spread to Japan even before the land connection. And so it spread much earlier, like in AD 1. But most historians don't agree on that. Most historians believe that Buddhism spread in Korea in Shilla period in 8th century AD. But the folklore tells that it was much earlier than that. So that was one connection between Korea and Japan. But even otherwise, one could see the language similarities. That's why most Korean students can learn Japanese very easily. But of course, their alphabetical systems are very different. In one way, Japan is very unique that Japan still retains that ancient Chinese characters and the meaning, which is very, very important in understanding the ancient links. For example, when Professor Kambe from Tokyo University met me in Chennai during a conference on the Korean-Indian connection, I was narrating the story of Kaya Federation. Immediately he got very excited. He says, Professor Kannan, there is a possibility that Japan is linked here. I asked him how. Then he started telling me the story of Yayoi people who migrated from the Kaya Federation into Okinawa and into Japan. So, but nevertheless, to trace this history, it is very important that one should understand the ancient Japanese. After the Cultural Revolution in China, the current Chinese is completely different. The simplified Chinese is very different from the Chinese used in the early part of the Common Era. And that only the Japanese retained that in their language. And so to understand actually even the Korean connection with India, it is very important to understand the Japanese language and the ancient Chinese characters that defines actually many things. And so Professor Kambe actually read all those ancient Chinese script with this unique vantage, and then he traced that Zen Buddhism spread from Pallava uh, period from southern India, especially from Kanjipuram, and all the way to Shaolin in China, and then later from China to Korea, and from Korea to Japan. But now Japan is at the center of Zen Buddhism, and Zen Buddhism has influenced Japan so much, uh, and that culture, they have a huge cultural treasure based on Zen Buddhism, like the Koan poetry, and the whole lot of stories that Tamils now read about Zen all come from Japan. So in that way, Japan is closely linked with Korea, and Korea is naturally linked with India through the Kaya Federation. So I'll see you later with more details. Thank you. Take care.